Welcome to our discussion today on understanding the common language of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. I'm so excited to start, which is really what I'm hoping will be just a free-flowing discussion, tapping into some incredible coaches and some incredible minds who are with me today. We have Tracy Sinclair and George Nuthu, who are going to just share with us from your perspectives, especially coming from the DEIJ task force for the ICF, your experiences and understanding and knowledge that you can share with everyone. So I thank you both for being here.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure.
Wonderful. So let's just jump in.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks, George. So I want to start off with asking you all a pretty simple question, but it's much deeper, I think, than people understand, because we hear DEI, DEIBJ, JEDIB. We hear so many different words, and I think sometimes it gets lost in the acronyms as to what those words mean and why they matter. So I would just like to share and start off with both of you. What are the elements? What are the key elements when we talk about DEIJ?
George, would you like to go first?
Just go first, ladies first.
Thank you. Well, I mean, I don't know if this sort of avoids your question or answers your question, Tonya, but when you said that, what came to my mind, first of all, is a part of this is actually thinking about continually what are the terms that we need to be engaging with around this? Because on the one hand, you could say, well, these acronyms and these terminologies and this language is evolving and changing so much. Therefore, on the one hand, do we have to stay grounded in certain core principles and stay with some kind of limited scope to that? But at the same time, in the spirit of being inclusive, these terms are changing, and that this whole understanding of what's important to us as a human race nowadays around this whole territory is still evolving and changing. And therefore, the terms that we are grounded in right now and that we are using may, of course, change. And part of what we will have to do as an organisation, I believe, is to stay agile with that, so that we are inclusive of new terms that are coming in, but not just for the sake of having new terms, but what do those new terms mean and why are they emerging and why are they important to people? So, that's sort of the first question that came to my, or the first thought that actually came to my mind before we even go into what any of these current terms mean for us, is just the inclusivity and the agility that we need to have to recognise and respect and honour that this whole concept is still evolving and developing, and we must stay aligned with that.
Yeah, that's a great container to set for this, that even as we talk about DEIJ and DEIBJ and JEDIB, that is just a holding space as we continue to understand and grow. And each of those letters was added for a reason in and of themselves, so that we could start to expand what used to just fall under that blanket of diversity, which is really just the numbers. And then understanding, why is equity important? Why is inclusion important? Why is belonging important? Why is justice important? So thanks for starting that, Tracy. George.
I think for me, just looking at our professional organization, we are over 40,000 members. We're in over 140 chapters, diverse across the globe. And just that by itself makes us all so different. And even right now in this call, we are in 3 different continents, our time zones. And I think when we're in the task force, for me, sitting down and looking at our members right across from Asia, Europe, Africa, America and South America, right across that, meeting at one point, but in different time zones, and just trying to understand, because even when we were still discussing, there was the issue of language and that coming in. So really, the question is, how do we still understand each other with our different cultures, with our different beliefs, our different preferences, different biases. How are we able to come together as a professional body and make each and every one of us access that which we need to have and move together as one professional body, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Tracy, but I think we are one of the organizations. I don't think there's any organization like ICF where professionals from all over the world are under one umbrella, and we are privileged to have that. So the challenge of bringing a diversity, and we talked about we could be diverse, but are we inclusive? Mm-hmm. Because the fact that you're diverse, that does not mean you're inclusive. What are certain factors that we need to look at to unite all these diverse cultures and people? I mean, different languages, even the issue of language, the issue of time zones, it works against us, Even I know this, we had to agree what time are we meeting. Yeah. Just those realities that make diverse a reality to us. So how do we manage that? Yeah. And for me, it's really managing that diversity, including that differences that we have, and staying together. So those are the things that kind of go on in my mind and really being in the task force. Those are the things that, as we were discussing, that keep coming to me.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. That in everything that we do, I think, luckily for all of us, we are tasked to create more space, to be more inclusive, to understand the differences, whether it's something as relatively simple as time zone. We understand time zones and those differences, but on the other end of when you're talking about language, you're talking about someone's identity, when you're talking about how they engage with other people, your own personality, and how you relate to other people, and the learning differences even that we have. So there's so many different aspects of it, but you bring a really good point around, because we are global. What is the importance of having a common language around diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice? Whoever would like to share.
Yeah, I'd love to comment on that. And I think it builds also on what George was just sharing around the fact that we are actually, compared to many organisations, very diverse, and in many different ways. And so in some ways, it's not necessarily just about the diversity, as George was saying, it's about other elements around equity and access and things like that. And so I think for us on the task force, one of the things that we were talking about is it is on the one hand important to have a common language, and at the same time to recognise that whatever we do in this space also needs to be localised for appropriate engagement on a practical level, because that, if we have a common language that then becomes a mandate, if you like, that's not being inclusive or diverse. So, again, there are some really important nuances to this. And of course, what we have wanted to do is to sort of ground ourselves in I guess, I may call it a glossary, if you like, a brief glossary of certain terms that we did spend quite a lot of time deliberating over, but not because it felt important to attach a label to it or a term, but because we felt it was important to convey the meaning that we felt that label had for us. And I think that's the important thing, and I guess we know this as coaches, right, that language is not just about the word and how it translates, it's more about the meaning behind the word. And so for us, and we hope for everyone else in our community, the important thing is that we engage with the meaning, the intention, and the philosophy, and the thoughts and feelings that go into those definitions behind the words, the labels. And then for us to hopefully, as one ICF, engage and embrace those, like we hopefully engage and embrace our core values as an organisation. And then we look at how does that work for us locally? And I don't just mean geographically, I mean locally in every possible context. How does that apply to me. I think the other thing, if I could just add that why this is important as well, is that one of the challenges is that as we said, is not so much that we're not diverse as an organization, but it's also about what is the level of equity or access to the profession of coaching, and therefore professional membership of an organization like the ICF. And that is where it starts to get interesting, because that is where there is a lot more challenge. And therefore, although our work initially is focusing on how can we be a good work in progress to be improving all of these things ourselves internally as an ICF infrastructure, but ultimately what we're really wanting to do is to become thought leaders for the profession. Well, hopefully we already are thought leaders for the profession, but to reinforce our thought leadership in the profession, so that the profession of coaching becomes more diverse, because that is where we don't have diversity. In terms of accessibility, there are still many examples of where there are pockets of communities within society that have whatever different kind of demographic we might be looking at, that don't have access to coaching, and therefore there is not sufficient diversity in the profession. So hopefully we're working from an outside perspective as well, to influence the marketplace and influence the profession of coaching beyond the ICF as well.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and you touched on this a little bit, is diversity ultimately is just about the numbers and the people in the room. It is not the all-encompassing of what it means to actually be inclusive. So George, I would love to hear your thoughts around the common language and the importance of understanding that, yes, we do have these different parts of language that we use to try to convey the meaning, as Tracy shared, but there's a reason that that's there and why that's important.
Well, it's important, and I think what we have tried to do as an organization is having the values, having a common definition of who we are, a common definition of our mission, of our vision, and our values, and the competencies and all that we have tried to make for ourselves, to define us as professional coaches. And that's the thing that we are trying to do. But however, is in actualizing those things at the local level, and I can speak for us in East, Central, and West Africa. Coaching is still a very new, we're putting up chapters right now. In Africa, we're just having, I think right now, 4 or 5 chapters, in East, Central, and West Africa. South Africa is way ahead of us. North Africa is kind of picking up. So now with this it's a new profession that is really picking up, and even getting training. Let's talk about even the training, access to training for coaches. That becomes even a challenge, because now we have to, because there are few, we find that we have to go online and get from outside our continent. Do you see? So starting even to be very, very intentional. How do we include coaches? And the first thing is to be trained. And how do we make just that? How do we make it accessible for coaches, for people who desire to be coaches? And then now it even brings up the cost of it. Do you see? Is it affordable? So there's all this talk about right now even being involved with the ICF Foundation, trying to take coaching to the non-profit world, because it seemed to be more in the corporate and in the business world. Do you see? Coaching is just for executives. How do you say no? Even the youth, the other day I was in one of our coach training institutes here, and I was so excited to find a 25-year-old lady coming to be trained, and she was saying, you are also excited because most of us are much older than her. We're talking about people in our 40s and in our 50s, people who are looking at coaching now. I want to retire. I want to do this with all my experience. So I think for me is including and just speaking is being accessible, including more in the service, including more in the training of people to be coaches. And you see it in different markets, in Western markets where it's way ahead, but in this part of the world where it is slower and needs to be accelerated, what needs to be done? Because otherwise we may find that we are playing catch up and feeling disadvantaged. So how can we be included?
Yeah, and the inclusion word is so important, especially as we're talking to chapter leaders here as part of GLF. What would we call an inclusive mindset as a chapter leader? What would that look like from both of your experiences?
Well, I think one of the ways I try to be inclusive is by challenging myself, challenging the assumptions that I'm making and challenging the normal practices and habits, because I think that's where we can become less diverse and inclusive, albeit unwittingly and unintentionally. And so as a chapter leader, especially when chapter leaders and chapter boards come in, there can be, I guess, and having been a chapter leader myself in the past, there can be a temptation to sort of just keep going, with business as usual. And let's face it, at the moment, we're all in the world desperately trying to get some kind of business as usual pattern back into our lives, aren't we? I think the thing I would offer up to chapter leaders is to really sit down and think about, use a coaching mindset, which is to provoke and evoke new thought. How can we challenge ourselves to not just do things the way that we've done, but when it comes to, I guess, local chapter matters, most of the time, core things on a chapter's priority is going to be attracting members and retaining members. And then part of that is adding development opportunities to members. That, at least in my day, were two of the core things that we were trying to really focus on. So when it comes to attracting members, to really think about who is it that you have in your area, and what is the demographic of the current membership of your chapter, and who's missing, who's not there. So rather than going with the business as usual to keep building more on what we've got, maybe it's looking for who's not in our room at the moment, who's not in our membership. And also from the development perspective, just us having development opportunities around this whole area of diversity and equity, inclusion and justice, I think is something that could probably do very well to be on any chapter development offering, even if it's just to get people together to start talking about it and considering, what does that mean for us here, wherever we are, and what else can we do to really challenge ourselves and think about what changes we might want to make.
Wonderful, Tracy. Yeah, just to get together and start the conversation, right?
Even if we did that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. George.
And I think each and every region has its own challenges of diversity and inclusion. And I think it's being very aware of that as a leader and inviting, exercising diversity and inclusivity in that space. Do you understand? Whatever diversity may be within your region. So for you as a leader, or as you as directors of the chapter, are you very aware of that? And are you intentional? Because what happens is with certain biases, you have blind spots, and you tend to want to stay in your comfort zone. Are you going beyond your comfort zone to include people? Are you very, very intentional? Or is it the same old cliches, the same old group of people that are engaged in certain tasks, in certain responsibility, in certain events? Or are you looking beyond that? Are you looking out for the new person who has come in? Are you looking out for the person who seemed to be ignored or just marginalized, or somebody who's different from you? Just really being very, very intentional. Because when it comes to diversity and inclusion and equity and belonging, you have to make that extra effort because it does not naturally come to many of us.
Yeah, and we're seeing with chapters, especially over the last couple of years with the technology and the virtual experience, that so many chapters are starting to recognize, wow, we can leverage and work together to do things. And we're, seeing chapters come together, and maybe we're in the same country, but now we're going to play together more as a consolidated group. But that means I'm bringing in lots of different parts. We all know different regions of the same country, different provinces, different states, whatever it may be. We want to start to make sure we're thinking about that and not just assuming that, well, the way we've done it, to your point earlier, Tracy, is the way that works. But we want to start to get those people in and ask, what are your experiences and what are your experiences? And to make sure that we truly are learning and embracing that, as we do see the benefit of working together more closely as chapters and across chapters. Good. Wonderful. So with that coming together more, and maybe not being as up on some of these differences or not as aware of some of these differences, what are some of the things, as you all as part of the DEIJ task force, noticed or recognized in the work you were doing of understanding, okay, this is going to be different in this part of the world and this could be different in another part of the world? What were some of those things that you noticed that might help our leaders start to think about things in a different way?
Well, it's a really good question. And I think it's some of the things that we noticed gave rise to the fact that everyone can have these assumptions and biases, even though we may not know about them. Like we have those blind spots that George was mentioning. And we all have biases, right? That's part of human nature, is to form judgments and opinions about things. The question is what do we do about them? It's how do we actually engage and challenge ourselves and think about what that means for us as far as how we're connecting with our communities. And so some of the things that we found were emerging is, first of all, I guess two things come to mind, and then I'll hand over to George in case you've got some more. I'm sure you have. One is, first of all, just how personal and sensitive this whole area can be. And that is something to take great care with. And one of the things that we did as a task force was to spend a lot of time, especially in the beginning, really working through how did we want to be together as a group of people, knowing that we might make mistakes, that we might unintentionally do or say something that could offend someone else, or that we have different practices in our culture that make something okay, but that's not okay for someone else in their culture. And that sensitivity is so high in this general area, because this is such a personal topic, that unfortunately it can sabotage your progress before you even start, because it can create such an inflammatory response, such an emotional response, that then makes progress and dialogue very limited or very inhibited. So one of the things that I think was really important for us was to talk at length, how will we be together, knowing that we're treading on delicate territory, treading on delicate topics, and to set our intention of respect and humility and good intention with each other and compassion, and a focus on helping to educate ourselves and each other rather than blame or challenge or point fingers, if that makes sense. So that was one really, really important area for us. The other one that came up, which was that, again, with assumptions, is that it can be easy to assume that this whole topic is based around certain elements of diversity and equity and inclusion and justice, and that our focus is not just on certain pockets or certain areas of this territory. That for us, we want to open up the scope of inclusion on every level, that we're talking about, we're not just talking about sexual orientation, we're not just talking about gender, we're not just talking about race or ethnicity, we're talking about all of those things, and that we are looking to embrace and to connect with each other, as the one thing that is a common denominator for us is that we're all human beings. And we want to connect on that level, that we reach out to each other intellectually and emotionally and psychologically, and that we are connecting as human beings. And then the conversation can start. Handing over to George.
I think another thing we experienced as we began, and one of the first exercises that actually we did was just for us sharing our experiences. Have you felt discriminated? Have you felt excluded? And it was very gratifying to know at certain levels, each and every one of us have experienced that as individuals. And so coming to that realization, this is a reality. We have experienced it. We have participated in that directly or indirectly. We have been affected by that directly or indirectly. So we bring our personal experiences into this. So with that in mind, what do we need to do? If we can feel this at a personal level, then what do we need to do? And here we have the challenge of this great global body of professionals who are trained and called to be coaches. Yet there's this challenge at a personal level and moving at a chapter level, at a regional level. How are we able to put this together and help this great organization that is global to kind of feel that we are one ICF. We are moving in the same direction, you know. And I think there's an analogy that was given. We're not a speedboat, we are like a cruise ship. You know, we are this big ship that is moving, that we have to turn it. You know, it is going to take time. And then even now there are 6 families organization. Now it takes even another different dimension. So just the excitement of seeing the challenge and the possibility. So that was something that we looked at.
It sounds like from both of you, it really is around that human connection, and the more space you create to share and learn with each other your perspectives and give each other grace and space to learn is so powerful. Question that I have, and this is a really quick one as we start to wrap up, but wanted to check in with you because data always comes up from our chapters of like, well, what data do we have? Can we get access to? And I didn't know if there was anything that came out of your work from the task force that might help people understand what data we can or can't collect. Any insight that you all have to share around that would be very welcome, I'm sure.
Well, I know that there is, an increasing amount of data that's being collected outside of what the ICF has specifically, and I'm sure some of that will be on the research portal. But the ICF has commissioned, as part of our task force, we have commissioned some data to be collected through our partnership with PwC. And so that is very exciting, actually, because we're really hoping that data will give us something back that can really inform what we're doing. And that felt important because the ICF is a data-driven organisation, and we want to take whatever stance we take, whatever recommendations we make, or whatever cultural practices we want to introduce, we want to make sure that that's on the basis of what is actually happening and what the data is telling us, rather than anecdotal stories, if you like. We want to make sure that we keep this real.
Yeah, so more to come on that, and that's great to hear that it's in progress. But we know with privacy laws, and again, the diversity in different parts of the world of what data can be collected and when, it's still something that everyone is trying to understand. So thanks for sharing that, Tracy. As we wrap up, I would just love to hear from the work that you all did as part of the DEIJ task force from ICF Global. Any parting thoughts of what that work meant to you, or also maybe even more importantly for ICF as a global entity, for all of us as members and leaders and people who are part of impacting the industry around this area?
I think the opportunity that we had as a task force was to kind of begin setting up a framework. And I think for the joy for Tracy and I, even as we were co-chairs for that team, was putting the team together and thinking of what does ICF need to do. And we gave them the recommendation, and it's great to know that the recommendation is being implemented And maybe Tracy can speak more about that. But I think for us is just sitting down together and appreciating that we reach a stage as an organization to look at these issues and address them and start preparing, because the way ICF is growing, it's like a wildfire. You know, it's just spreading like crazy, and more and more people are coming, and more diversity and inclusivity. Those challenges will be there. So it is at the right moment right now to put certain procedures and policies in place such that as people come in, it's clear on how we need to still stay united in our diversity. That's all I can say.
Tracy?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with everything that George said. It was, for me, it was an absolute joy and pleasure to work with wonderful people and to discuss a topic that not only is deeply important, but is one where I learned so much. And it's just very interesting as well, you know, and it's a little bit like ethics when you can step aside from the fear of it or the sensitivity of it, and you can actually engage with these conversations. It's very stimulating, very educational, and it's something that has really broadened my mind, and I feel that I'm enriched as a result of that. So I just encourage everyone to get into this topic and actually learn about it rather than you know, be nervous or step around it and things like that. Let's just come together and talk.
Yes, and again, thank you both for just stepping into that awareness of just connecting with each other and doing this work. Learn, maybe we'll stumble on things, whatever that may be. But as coaches, to your point, Tracy, we're used to talking about all sorts of personal things and very impactful things in people's lives. And this is just another extension of that, and an opportunity to support our clients, support our members, support our overall One ICF, but also for us as coaches to get comfortable and recognize maybe where some of our growth opportunities are. So there's just so much richness here that we already have so many of the skill sets that can allow us to have these conversations and start to make an impact with our clients, with our chapters within One ICF. So just so excited to have both of you here. Thank you both for taking the time, and looking forward to learning more together as we continue through this journey of understanding diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.